Hello and welcome back to Exothermic Plays Games. I spent an entire year ranking my 366 favorite video games of all time in a daily countdown, and I've been adding onto it in a handful of ways this year. In this video, I'm going to rank Super Mario RPG, originally released in 1996, developed by Square and published by Nintendo. Yes, it'll get ranked onto my whole giant list, now approaching 400 titles, but before I do that, I want to really lean in on the ranking bit. We're not just ranking the game today, oh no, we're ranking like everything in it. I'm ranking the party members, I'm ranking the bosses, I'm ranking the minigames. So if you're here to see how things stack up against each other, it's your lucky day. Alright, I do need to get a few things out of the way before we really jump into these rankings. Obviously, this is footage of the Switch remake from 2023. I had never played Super Mario RPG before, but only recently got around to it, and this is the version I played. The reason I'm finally playing this game, apart from I've wanted to do it for a long time, is that I'm doing a collaboration with my friends over at Old Gamers Almanac, where Hunter and I are tackling 6 different games that are from Nintendo properties, but not actually developed by Nintendo. So we can really dig into some of the differences in approach from these different companies. The stuff we're doing for that is going to come out later this year, so go ahead and give OGA a follow wherever you listen to podcasts, and check out their show. It's really good. I'll also link the episode where we cover this game in the description below once it's out. Anyways, I asked Hunter if he wanted me to play a specific version for Super Mario RPG, and he basically told me whichever way I want to is fine. This Switch version is a very faithful remake, but there are some differences. The vast majority are quality of life stuff, like auto-saving and UI improvements, but there's a couple I do want to touch on specifically that will influence some of these rankings. The first one ties to the action command. If you press the A button just before you hit, or are hit with an attack, you'll deal more or take less, or even potentially zero damage. This mechanic was completely present in the original release, but they added a meter that charges every time you do it successfully in the remake, and when you get to 100%, you can unleash a bonus attack that changes based on your party composition, called a triple move. Now, I don't know if they rebalanced boss fights over having this mechanic, because you can do some really crazy damage with it, but I do know that it felt pretty great to use, and was a frequent influence on which characters I had in my party. Related to that, the other mechanical change I want to touch on is that in the original game, you could only swap your party members outside combat. Everyone leveled up with each other and gained experience regardless of whether or not they fought, but you were stuck with who you had. In the remake, you could switch party members whenever you wanted, and it didn't even spend their turn to do so, which I imagine radically changes how much certain abilities are valued. Based on reading about the differences, since I haven't actually played the Super Nintendo version, I'm not sure if you still get to swap party members if someone dies, or if you're just stuck with them and you've got to make sure to revive them, which ultimately wouldn't have been that big of a deal by the time I was later in the game, because I found myself drowning in restorative items that I'm sure I would have been using if I couldn't swap people around all the time. Now that we've got the differences out of the way, let's get ranking. I'm going to split the ranking of each character between how I like them narratively and how I like them mechanically, starting with the story stuff to kind of explain who they are. The premise of this game is that Bowser kidnaps Princess Peach, as he often does, and then Mario goes and saves her, as he often does, but then the Mushroom Kingdom is besieged by an interdimensional threat. A giant sentient sword pierces Bowser's castle, Bowser gets evicted, and Mario and Peach are separated. In order to stop this invasion and save everyone, you have to gather your MacGuffin items through a series of chapters and bosses, and then stop the threat and save the world. I'm being intentionally obtuse about the details here so that people that want to avoid complete spoilers can still do so, but also because it really does not matter that much. There's some good story beats to Super Mario RPG, but the actual narrative is unfortunately kind of bland. The good stuff comes from some of the dynamic character arcs in the game. I want to emphasize it's the dynamic arcs, and by that, I mean Mario and Peach are Mario and Peach, and they both, narratively, are very boring and very lame. They're pretty much tied for last here, but if I have to pick an order, I'd put Mario at last, because at no point does he say or do anything interesting or even funny. He's just there. Peach, at the very least, goes out of her way to escape her own castle to join your party after you rescue her, and definitely shows some really strong willpower at a couple points. So, 5 is Mario, 4 is Peach. Third place is a substantial improvement, however, and it's here that we get Bowser. Not long into the game, you find Bowser and his crew have been kicked out of their own castle, and they're trying to figure out how to reclaim it, and also, kidnap Peach again. But more importantly, get the castle back, because if Mario ever saw him in this pitiful position, Bowser would never get to live it down. There's some comedic irony all wrapped up in a box with a pretty bow on it and placed gently into your lap. He tries to recruit Mario's help by claiming you've joined his minions, and since our interests align, we just kind of go along with it. It's like, sure, boss. Yeah. Along the way, though, he tries to justify his good deeds in a variety of ways, and it's clear by the end he just wants to help, actively, and actually cares about the world and wants to do some good for once, and the thinly veiled pretense he comes up with is pretty funny. I really appreciate how this is the start of seeing Bowser becoming a more interesting character, and even though this was made and written by Square, I choose to believe it's the canonical reason that Bowser gets to hang out in Mario Party and the like. After Bowser comes the first new character I get to talk about in this game, and that's Geno, who appears to be a puppet, but is actually the reason this game has a story. When the giant sentient sword attacked Bowser's castle, it also shattered the Star Road, which is basically a magical shield above the world that not only stopped it from being invaded from outside forces, but also allowed stars to grant wishes. With the road gone, nobody's wish could ever come true again, so a star spirit possesses the body of this kid's wooden doll to guide Mario down the path to saving the day. And it's a good thing this angelic Chucky came along, because oh man, were we doing a whole lot of nothing before that. There's a lot of things to like about Geno, and I think he definitely gets some bonus points for being new and unique to this game, but there's also something to be said about this kid's toy coming to life and the kid's reaction being like, "Mom, this is so cool, and I'm not even lying this time. My toy is gonna save the world." And just immediately rolling with it. Like, he doesn't even have questions. Also, he shoots maybe bullets out of his fingers, and that is a very funny thing to have in this Mario game. But we'll talk about that a little bit more in the mechanics ranking. The most important thing that Geno does is that he is the only character in this entire game that actually gives a shit about the impending apocalypse and prospective enslavement of the entire Mushroom Kingdom. He's dead serious, and everyone else is just along for the ride. But the best party member narratively is the other new character, Mallow. There's so much to love about Mallow. He's great. Mallow is a kid that Mario runs into early on trying to get something from town for his grandfather, and Mario's just like, "Hey, I helped you get your grandfather's pie," or whatever it was. "In exchange, want to come with me and go kill God?" And Mallow's totally down for it, because his frog grandfather taught him to help people. Oh, yeah, his grandfather's a frog. Mallow, who is obviously named that because he looks like a marshmallow with arms and legs, believes he is a frog, technically a tadpole, but a frog. He believes that with such certainty that when the Grand Frog, who incidentally is a magical frog sage, gives you his blessing for Mallow to go on this journey, the little guy is shocked. Yes, shocked, I tell you, to learn that he's not a frog, and he washed up on the riverbank in a bundle of reeds, like Moses. You know, from the Bible. Anyways, as you go along on your journey, Mallow looks for clues as to who his parents are, and you get tiny little tidbits as you go along. Since this is the coolest character narratively, if you want to avoid spoilers for at least something in this game, feel free to pause the video here, check the timestamp in the description. I'll have one for skipping ahead to the mechanical ranking. For the rest of you, I am prepared to divulge Mallow's greatest secret. Near the end of the game, you ascend to the kingdom of the Cloud People, secluded in the sky, hidden away from the rest of the world. It's immediately obvious that these must be his people. And again, he is not a frog. But who could his parents be? Oh, you know, only the king and queen. That's Prince Mallow to you. There's a giant crow impersonating Mallow, which is very funny, given the irony that it's so obviously not a cloud. And Mallow is so obviously not a frog. But you beat him up and stuff, and the crow feels bad, and it's actually a super nice guy and was really manipulated into doing all of this bad stuff, and it's cute. But Mallow's determined to kill God with you, because this game was made by Square, so he's got to commit deicide before he can join his place as royalty. I love that little cloud. Now that you're familiar with the world and the party, we can talk about mechanics. We've got some tried and true Square turn-based combat with the added wrinkle of action commands I already talked about, and each character can tap into this stuff in slightly different ways. Each character has their own unique weapons they can equip, and each type of weapon has very slightly different timings for when to press the A button for their attack action commands, and it's kind of fun to learn the differences, but outside of that timing thing, the only way you interface with that aspect will just always be the same. Really, I don't have much preference for characters in that regard, because it's just a matter of learning when to press the button, and the animations, at least in the Switch remake, are all detailed enough that it's fairly easy to learn for each character, but my understanding is that's true of the original as well. Where the characters are different are really their different base stats and their abilities. Everyone has a basic attack, but there's spells or other special attacks that cost flower points. I'll explain each character's toolkit as we go through the ranking, so let's get into it. In dead last is the King of the Koopas, Bowser. That's not to say he's a bad fighter. He's actually pretty good. He's just kind of boring. His biggest statistical advantage is that he's got a ton of health and he punches hard. His abilities are also about him punching hard. There's not a lot of interesting stuff going on, and so especially with the mid-combat party swaps you can do on the Switch version, while he was very frequently in my light-up, it was mostly during times I didn't need something special going on that the rest of the crew brings to the table. There is something to be said for the triple move configurations he's a part of, as they're generally the best damage output in the game, but Big Number isn't really that interesting. A little better than Bowser, but not by much, is Geno. He plays kind of like a marksman with high single target damage, but not a lot of durability, and he's able to do a mix of physical and magical damage, so that flexibility is very nice. Importantly, however, he's got a huge buff spell that can elevate your best attacker for any given fight, and while I didn't stick around for the post-game harder version of many of the bosses, my understanding is that's pretty crucial when you get to the hardest fights the game has to offer. And I cannot understate how funny it is to me that this wooden doll in a Mario game is literally shooting bullets out of his fingertips. They're just like look at your fingers, look at your hands, look at them. Now take like the top knuckle and like towards the fingertip and just remove it. Actually cut your fingertips off. Don't do that. It's a joke. But imagine, and then bullets shoot out of there. Just bang, 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 bang. That's what Geno does. And then he replaces his fingertips. Filling out the middle of the pack for mechanical rankings is Princess Peach, which is funny because she's by far the character I used the least, but is also simultaneously the most important to my path to beating the game. Peach is a dedicated support character with powerful healing spells that can heal both individual characters and the entire party, including a resurrection ability. She's also got a disabling spell that tries to put all of the enemies to sleep, which can really come in clutch. She has a silence ability, which not helpful often, but when it is, it's really big. Late in the game, she gets a massively powerful damage spell, but does admittedly cost a lot of flower points, so I generally avoided it, but there were times where I just knew I had a lot of extra mana and I was able to just sink it into it. Outside of that, her attacks are fairly pitiful, so with the party swapping of the Switch remake, I was able to bring her in for healing and then swap her out whenever I didn't need that. But the role she fills is absolutely invaluable, and her very unique abilities throughout the game make her better than the two relatively bland flavors of damage that Geno and Bowser provide. Our other spellcaster, Mallow, is my second favorite fighter in Super Mario RPG, and when it comes to large groups of enemies, an essential party member. His regular attacks don't pack a lot of punch, but I leaned heavily into his magic. If you've watched pretty much any of my Final Fantasy videos, you know that I love a little guy that casts spells, and that's for sure what Mallow is. Every time any character levels up, they gain various stats that are predetermined with the level, but you also get to pick a category for them to gain a little bit extra. Other than a couple times I increased Mallow's maximum health because he started to get one shot, I increased his magic stat every time. The timing for the action command on his spells is some of the most interesting in the game to me because you need to get a feel for when a non-physical animation will make contact with an enemy, and that takes a bit more practice than everything else, which makes it very rewarding. He's also the only consistent source of elemental damage in the game, so taking advantage of type matchups is huge. It's worth mentioning that while he's a damage powerhouse in the right circumstances, early in the game, until you get Peach, he's also your only source of healing outside of spamming items, but he gets quickly outclassed in that department by the princess. While Mallow has his weaknesses, notably his very, very poor defenses and physical attack, he was never anything less than a delight to have on the team. That being said, there's one character that's better mechanically, and that I played even more than Mallow, because the game literally forced him on me. Obviously, through process of elimination. The best character, mechanically, is also the character that I disliked the most, narratively, and that's none other than Mario. He's the hero! I mean, really, Geno's kind of the hero that dragged Mario along, but we can ignore that for now. Mario is, from the start of the game, the most interesting character to control. He's you on the map, getting to jump around and find all sorts of items and go down pipes and do, movement. But in combat, it doesn't even bother me much that the game will not let you swap him out. You literally cannot. Because he's also the best fighter. He's got the most single target damage potential, respectable group damage, and the only character better at taking a hit than him is Bowser. His abilities are iconic and fun, his weapons all feel great, and every time it's Mario's turn, I'm excited for how he'll turn the tide of battle. The most iconic character in video game history really lives up to his name in this game's combat. Regarding any semblance of skill in playing this game, Mario's where all of it is. The button mashing on the fireball attack is actually a little hard to get to full, I think. And I say that as a good thing, and getting good at the multi-jump attack, allowing you to do the attack potentially forever, as long as you keep timing the action command correctly, can become the highest damaging attack in the entire game. And it's a very fun and interesting way that no other character comes even remotely close to. Now that I've gone into all of that detail, it's time to compile the characters into an overall ranking. I'll keep this short since I don't need to rehash everything I just said. I want to be clear that I like every character in this game. It's a good party, which is definitely helped by being a pretty small cast, but coming in last place is Bowser. His combat's boring, and his story is pretty one-dimensional once he joins the party. He's got a lot of comedic relief going on, but that's about it. Coming in 4th place is Princess Peach. She does almost nothing for the story other than claim a little bit of independence. And while I think she's important to the combat, she doesn't do much outside filling her niche role. 3rd place gets a little more interesting with our favorite puppet, Gino. Their story is really cool, and combat with them is engaging. Plus, there's a fun cinematic element that got added with the Switch remake that I really like, and he's fun in all of those. If you've been paying attention, it shouldn't be too hard to figure out the order of the last 2 here. Coming in 2nd is the name of the game, Mario. Obviously, I love him in combat and all the other mechanics in the game, but story-wise, he really is just there, and doing, next to nothing. Considering how bland he is narratively, the combat did a ton of heavy lifting to get him this high. That means the best character in Super Mario RPG, and by a country mile, is the cutest cloud you ever did see, Mallow. I was definitely not expecting to like this kid anywhere near as much as I did, and he's really the highlight of the whole game in my eyes. It makes me sad we don't see Mallow in any later Mario titles. Sure, he's a spirit in the Super Smash Bros. Ultimate stuff, but who isn't? So please, Nintendo, Squeenix, give me more Mallow. Now that we're done with the party, it's time to move on to some enemies. There's a lot of boss fights throughout this game, considering how short it actually is. Not even counting any of the post-game optional bosses, I'm ranking 20 fights, and that's even skipping over some that I feel are more like mini-bosses. With that in mind, I'm not going into anywhere near as much detail as I did with the individual party members. We'll be doing this fairly rapid fire, but keep in mind that as a general rule, the bosses are going to have lots and lots and lots of health, and often feature twists on some of the more unique general enemies you've been fighting in that particular zone. So, in last place, number 20, is Croco the First Time. This is a thieving alligator that's basically the second boss in the game. I mean, technically it's the third, but really the Hammer Bros don't count. But you could argue he's even the first. He stole Mallow's money, which is what gets him involved in your party, which you'd think would make me care about this fight more, but it's still basically a tutorial and very, very easy, making it very, very boring. Number 19 is Factory Chief and Gun Yoke. This fight very late in the game has basically one mechanic worth caring about. Gun Yoke is a tank that fires a super giant mega cannon! The Factory Chief is extremely ignorable, so you just throw lightning attacks at the Gun Yoke, and then it's smooth sailing. What should be a big, epic fight this late in the game is pretty one-dimensional. Number 18 is Director, another late-game boss with a one-dimensional mechanic, but this one's a little less straightforward. He summons an endless supply of minions, but thanks to Mallow's massive AoE damage, it's pretty easy to keep them clear. If you really want to make the fight easy, just leave one of the minions alive, and he'll never summon more. Kinda lame. Number 17 is Countdown, I think one of the cooler looking bosses. The end of the game is really one big boss rush, so throwing so many of them at you in such a short time, they tend to be pretty straightforward. This one still is, but it's at least cool about it. This clock has randomized abilities it's constantly throwing at you, and you can even learn what they are to react properly with the action command by paying attention to the time shown on its face. This is super cool and sounds like it should be really skill intensive and complicated, but the problem is that most of the attacks aren't actually that impactful and fairly ignorable. Except for the one that isn't. You can attack the clock and the individual bells. As any experienced JRPG player can tell you, it's important to take out the two healers before focusing your attention on the boss. Number 16 is Clay Morton. This guy is the first real boss fight of the game that provides any challenge and mechanics. He throws a constant army of Shy Guys at you, and while the fight is not especially complicated, since you've only got Mario and Mallow at this point, and not a lot of abilities, it took me a while to get the defensive timings down. This is the fight that made me start to get good at some of the timings of the action command, because if you can't get that down, those Shy Guys are going to cut through you like a hot knife through butter. I also just love Shy Guys, so any fight with those makes me at least a little happy. Number 15 is, hey, Bowser. He's in your party, but remember, at the beginning of the game, you go and save Peach, you fight Bowser. This is that. It's the opening sequence to the game, the actual tutorial. So why is it ranked higher than the other sort of tutorial fight? Well, for starters, it sets the tone for some of the comedy of this game, which I love, and also because it's just iconic. Using the chandeliers as set pieces throughout the fight is great, and I'll never say anything bad about a fight against Bowser where I get to listen to him quip and talk and be kind of dumb. Number 14 is Sar Dragon and Zombone. This was an unexpectedly cool fight. You're in the middle of an active volcano and have to get past a dragon. There's not a whole lot of dragons in Mario, so this was a pleasant surprise. He's able to put out a lot of group damage, but thanks to Peach, it's very manageable. Also, Mallow's elemental attacks can take the dragon down really quickly, and then it comes back. It falls into the lava, and then all of its flesh and stuff burns away, which you would think would kill it, but apparently it just makes it stronger, and it comes back as a skeleton dragon. Now, they've got a spell that does massive group-wide damage, and it's really hard to keep up with the healing, but thankfully, they're vulnerable to silence, so Peach can just shut them right up. Very, very cool fight. Number 13 is Valentina and Dodo. What's super cool about this fight is that you're immediately splitting the party to do 2 fights at once. This is the only time in the entire game this happens, so it's worth mentioning. Dodo, the big bird that was somehow impersonating Mallow, still very funny to me, picked a fight with Bowser, and this is the only time that Bowser's tankiness felt really, really exciting. Once you deal with Dodo as Bowser, you're fighting Valentina with the group, and she's casting various spells and stuff, but it's not a whole lot to keep on top of, and just keep hitting her, and eventually the fight will be over. It's not a very intricate fight, but I just love how the party got split. Very cool. Number 12, Birdo. Yeah, I said Birdo, like the weird looking thing that was not originally a Mario character, but became one because of the weirdness that is Super Mario Bros. 2. Except this time, Birdo's kinda big. Why is Birdo so big? This is pretty much the only time in this entire game that I made use of the defend command. Birdo will announce when they're about to do some crazy big attacks, and just hit defend there. What makes Birdo interesting is that the eggs they launch at you, if you defend properly, can be blown up like grenades, dealing extra damage to her. Birdo is throwing her eggs at you, which then you make explode to beat her up. What a world Square created. Number 11 is Spiritovich. The extremely goofy geezer packs a punch. He's got a lot of funny little quips in the story, and I definitely hit pause on my recording by accident, so I can't show you his cool mechanic, which is a shame. He hits extraordinarily hard, but at some point he makes a mirage copy of himself, and you have to determine which one is real. Mallow's got a spell that shows the thoughts of characters, and you can even find the mirage by using that, and you'll see the fake is thinking to itself that it hopes, oh, I hope they don't figure out I'm not real, ah! Definitely one of the funniest fights of the game. Number 10, Johnny. Johnny's full legal name is Jonathan Jones, and is basically just Davy Jones, but is a shark. Leader of a bunch of criminal pirates that lords over a haunted, sunken ship, total badass. Also, when I said Johnny's a shark, I so lied to you. Johnny is not a shark. It's clearly a guy in a shark costume, and the sharks are too dumb to figure that out. What's so cool about Johnny's fight is that at some point he'll force Mario to fight him 1v1, which is a really interesting mechanic that I thought was very cool, and like Johnny's a cool guy. I love Johnny. He's great. Bros. Number 9, King Calamari. This is a giant squid, and you have to reach the body by fighting a gauntlet of tentacles as you work your way down a long hallway. It's pretty cool, and while the fight itself doesn't have a whole lot to speak of, especially if you lean on elemental advantages from Mallow, I really like the environmental aspects of it, and that's something that the game could have done more of, but was really cool here. Number 8 is Chefs and Cake. A villain kidnaps Peach, tries to force her to marry him, and it's not Bowser. There needs to be a wedding cake, and he's got this big chef to make it. Unfortunately, things go wrong, and you have to fight the chefs and their creation. The problem is, the cake is alive. This is a really good 3-phase fight, where all 3 phases are fairly interesting. I like the chefs and their banter in phase 1, I love the candle trick that the cake does, and when you get to the base of the cake, you've got to look out for some extra damage, but forcing the villain to eat this cake that's clearly alive is a hilarious and great scene. Number 7, Booster. Speaking of the villain that we're forcing to eat a living cake, it's this guy, and he's a certified idiot. There's 2 ways to do this fight, and by that I mean you might not do this fight. I didn't do it. There's a mini game where he's sending his goons looking for this Mario plush doll and you're dodging them while in hiding. Eventually you're forced to be revealed, but if you last that long, you didn't do the fight at all, and instead locate his doll, causing you to earn his immense gratitude. And then, the idiot yells the password for Peach's prison right in front of your face. Booster's hilarious. Number 6, Punchinello. For starters, what a name! This guy does 2 things. First, he punches, it's in his name. But then quickly realizes he's outmatched, so he starts throwing out his second thing he does. He makes a lot of bob-ombs. You've got to defeat wave after wave of bigger and stronger bob-ombs, and the last one spawning is so big, it lands on the guy and kills him. Great writing. Very classic, goofy square stuff. Number 5 is Croco, but this time in the mole mines. This guy's back, and there's been a lot of build-up for it. You chase him around these sprawling mines, taking out his goons, and when you finally catch him, he immediately steals all of your items. It's a pretty great trick that makes for an interesting fight at a time that you don't have a ton of spells yet to lean on. He's a very funny character that, by the end of the game, turns a whole new leaf, and this is the start of that. I love how the fight marries story to combat in a way that's otherwise pretty hard to do in a game like this, and it's the turning point for me finding the character just annoying to becoming really endearing. Number 4 is the Axum Rangers. This is an enormous jump up. From 5 to 4, big jump. These top 4 are leaps and bounds better than all of the other fights I've talked about, and it starts with the Axum Rangers, which are definitely just the Power Rangers. When you get out of the volcano and seem to claim the star there, you're intercepted by the Axum Rangers on their airship. Thankfully, you've barely been able to jump aboard, but you get there and fight them over everything on there. Each ranger has a totally unique moveset and personality, and you can approach the fight in a ton of ways, making it one of the most dynamic encounters in the game. Whether you want to focus on each individual healer one at a time, or if you want to spread it out, or maybe do 2 and 2, there's a lot of options, and the order you do it is going to make the fight very unique and different to your playthrough. They've got a lot of great dialogue, and it's one of the most strategically interesting fights in the whole game. Number 3 is Bowyer. I want to first talk about the visual design here. This is quite literally an archery bow with appendages. Not even Rayman, which is technically a humanoid eggplant, can top this ridiculousness. Bowyer does something extraordinarily as a 4th wall break, where he's literally disabling the buttons on your controller. He shoots an arrow at a button on the ground, and that button on your controller stops working. It's amazing. It's something I wish they did a lot more of. In that regard, he might be the most interesting and memorable fight in the game, and the only thing keeping him at number 3 is that he's not actually that hard. Number 2 is Exor. We are finally at the sword that evicted Bowser. Exor is this big, dumb, Excalibur-looking sentient sword that can't move. It got thrown there, and it's stuck there. Despite being one sword, you're really fighting like 4 things at once as different parts of its body. Most of it's immune until you take out the eyes, but they respawn, so you get this really interesting cycle of taking out these pesky eyes and then dumping as much damage as you could possibly imagine into the rest, all while making sure you don't die to a ceaseless onslaught of damage from the boss. It's a pretty tricky fight, at least relative to the rest of the game, and obviously being number 2, one of the most memorable ones to me. But there's more, and you get there by, after you beat Exor, in order to get to the last dungeon, you go through a portal that is his mouth. His mouth is a portal to another world. But number 1 is Smithy. This is the actual end boss of the game, and the final fight in the story. Smithy is functionally god of this weird pocket universe that you got to by going through Exor's mouth, and he's trying to overrun the Mushroom Kingdom, and by far, this is the longest and most interesting fight. The first phase has you dealing with him in what I'm going to call his crotchety king mode. He's got this big hammer, and he's cranking out tools to help fight against you, and they hit really hard, but they do have limited mana, so as long as you're able to weather the storm, they're pretty ignorable after their spells are spent, and you can take out the smelter that allows him to make more of those, so you can safely focus on Smithy himself after that. Eventually, he gets frustrated and breaks the platform you're all standing on, which is a funny thing, and you descend into the depths of hell, where you see Smithy's true form, littered with a bunch of corpses of maybe previous Smithies? I don't know. Which, now that I'm looking at my footage again, I think this may have been the design for Labubus, like they based them on this guy maybe. This is what elevates the fight, being what I'd expect of a square final boss. The mechanics, not the Labubu thing, that's weird, make those go away. The mechanics elevate everything. He continuously reshapes his head into different things, and what totally redefines his moveset in ways you need to constantly adapt to. We've got the tank form, where he hits hard, but is very vulnerable to lightning damage. Thanks for saving me yet again, Mallow, my precious cloud. There's wizard form, which, you guessed it, is like the opposite of tank form. He can turn into a casket, which is really a self-heal phase. Again, Mallow is invaluable here and the star of this fight. Lastly, he can turn into a treasure chest, which is really fun and has a lot of random effects and debuffs and things that can happen. He'll swap between all of these at, as far as I can tell, totally random times and orders, and the unpredictability of the fight is incredible and often challenging. Smithy was a phenomenal end to this game, and really the goofiness of his different forms and quips encapsulated many of the best parts of Super Mario RPG. While the narrative isn't there as much, I think when looking at the grand scheme of Square JRPG final bosses, he's pretty firmly in the top half, and that is some glowing praise. Speaking of Square traditions, we can't have a Square JRPG without having probably too many pointless minigames. Now, it's important to note that I am not ranking every minigame in Super Mario RPG. In fact, I'm not even ranking most of them. I'm only ranking the ones that I wound up running into in my pretty direct, critical path-oriented playthrough of the game. There's a casino in this game, which I only learned in looking up the list of minigames after I was finished with everything to help with ranking them. There's a ton of minigames in this game, and I only played 7. So here's a not in any way comprehensive ranking of just 7 minigames from Super Mario RPG. Last place, number 7, is the Yoshi Egg. When you beat encounters, sometimes you're able to play a minigame to increase your money or experience earned. It's a classic shell game where you have to track the Yoshi. It's painfully easy. I appreciate it just for being a thing to do that randomly makes combat rewards a little better, but it's not especially good or anything. It's fine, and nothing more, and by the time I was towards the end of the game, I was sick of it and was just saying no, even though maybe some bonus experience would have actually been kind of helpful. Number 6 is the Sky Bridge. This is a mini game where you have to cross these floating platforms without getting hit. The problem is, the platforming in Super Mario RPG is really not the point of the game, and I suck at this. There's different difficulties, and it's kind of fun to do on easy, but anything beyond that immediately becomes impossible for me, not even because of dodging the stuff. It's because I can't land the damn jump. I just jump straight into the chasm below. Number 5 is the Paratrooper Cliff Scale. This is definitely some better platforming compared to the Sky Bridge, and by a big amount. The only problem here is that this game, while I actually enjoyed it quite a lot when doing it for story progression, is good exactly the one time. The replayability of it's not there at all. It's pointless. I mean, yeah, you can try to get a faster time, but whatever. You get a lot of diminishing returns. Number 4, the Mine Car. Nintendo sure loves outsourcing properties to other developers and having them make a mine car minigame. This one's actually very replayable, unlike the others, and I think much more interesting than the ones in Donkey Kong Country. I know, I really like the speed mechanic and having to slow down and when you go around turns and speeding up to make jumps. This would probably be the number 1 minigame here if I wasn't so awful at it. I'm not sure if it's input lag or something else I'm just doing wrong, but I went off the tracks a lot, and when you start doing it constantly, it's kind of hard to get into a rhythm. But when you do get that rhythm, oh, it's a thing of beauty. Number 3 is Booster Hill / Beetle Chase. The first time you do this minigame, you're chasing Booster up a hill. You can later come back to play it over and over, collecting beetles for some weirdo that loves beetles. You're chased by Shy Guys and have to dodge what they're doing, while also jumping on Booster or the beetles. It's a fun game that I have played several times and didn't suck at, so that was a bonus. Number 2 is the Tadpole Songs. So, at the Tadpole Pond where you meet Mallow's adoptive grandfather, if you go all the way to the right, you'll find Todovsky, a famed composer, who's an absolute hack. I traveled all around the world and found these beautiful melodies and painstakingly input them into your stupid tadpole pond to make the tadpoles sing this wonderful music. And you have the audacity to claim that I unlocked your vision for your masterpiece? Todovsky, you're nothing but a thieving, talentless fraud. And your minigame is basically not replayable, unless you really enjoy composing a very simple melody with only one voice that's like 2 measures long at a time. Number 1, Midas River. Funnily enough, I think the best minigame in Super Mario RPG is the first one. You've got branching paths, a variety of rewards, and several stages that all feel really different and very skill-based. It's a great minigame that I played several times to farm some money in the game, and you know what? I'll do it some more. I've got no complaints with Midas River, and it really set the bar for the rest of the game, only for none of the other minigames, at least of the ones I ran into, ever lived up to. So, good job, Midas River. So that's everything in the game I've got to rank. I could do items or something, I guess, but to be honest, they're all boring. I could do weapons, Bowser's Chain Chomps are the coolest because I think it's funny to throw those at people. The hammer's the technically best one because of the splash damage, and oh, Peach gets a frying pan? Beyond that, they're all tied. Cool! Now we ranked everything. Except you didn't think I wasn't going to rank the game on this channel, did you? That'd be wild. Super Mario RPG is my new 51st favorite game. It's an incredible game that I was totally surprised at how much it immediately won me over. Some other nearby games are Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire at number 50, the first Borderlands at 52, the first Animal Crossing at 55, and Earthbound at 48. The game is just overflowing with endless charm and whimsy every step of the way, and the humor is totally up my alley. When I posted that I was starting this game in Discord, someone said the game is very exothermic coded and that I would love it, and they were absolutely correct. It's still not up to the amount of love I have for Paper Mario, which is sitting pretty at number 13, but there's so much of what I love about that game in this one, and Square really laid the foundation for what those games are all about. If you've never played Super Mario RPG, you're really missing out on one of the most laid-back, incredible JRPGs ever made, and I really do think it's a must-play for anyone that likes those kinds of games. It's an instant classic that I will never understand how it didn't dominate when it released. Like, yeah, it released the same year as the Nintendo 64, so obviously it got overshadowed by Super Mario 64, but as you may have noticed, I ranked this one higher than that. Thank you so much if you made it all the way to the end of this video. I know it's a long one, but obviously I thought this game was great, and I've got even more to say about it. You can check that out over at Old Gamer's Almanac, hopefully sometime in September, but I'll update the description with the link to all of that once it's up. I want to thank my Patreon members for continuing to throw their hard-earned money at me for reasons that are between them and God, I guess. Y'all are the reason I do this, and I really hope you especially like this video. If you thought this was a cool way of looking at JRPGs, I'm considering making rankings of characters and bosses and the like for more games in that genre, even ones I've already covered. So if you want to see what I really think about Cloud Strife, or whatever, let me know in the comments here or in Discord. But that's me for today. You all have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.